Welcome to Persia. I am your host, Loki the Gamer, here to tell you about my homemade magic cards based on Civilization 6. So if you like Civilization and if you like magic, you are a weird freak nerd just like me, so thank you for being that one rare audience that this project needs. Persia was actually the second set that I ever designed right after my native Canada, and it came to me because I had one great idea, one concept of Magic the Gathering that would apply, I thought, very well to the Persian people of Civilization 6. And afterwards, I revisited it and made a lot of changes. It seems like there were many improvements that could be done, but I did keep that one cool concept. The 6 cards in the Persian bundle will have 2 legendary lands, so yes, one model after each of its leaders, and indeed, as I've just said, 2 leaders, and finally 2 unique builds. An overview of Persia gives us Surprise War, and that is what inspired me to create something out of that set so early, because I thought that the Blitz keyword would be perfect to represent a surprise war. I do have a Blitz-themed magic deck with Toolkit Henzo as the commander. It is a really fun deck. It's got so many different triggers that trigger off of everything, off of a creature dying, a permanent getting sacrificed, and of course most of my creatures do have something cool that happen when they themselves die, and then some card draw triggers, a whole bunch of cool triggers. It's a great deck. I do recommend looking into Toolkit Henzo. I call them Henzo. Is it Henzo or Henzi? It's my own deck, I should know. Anyway, so the Blitz keyword I thought would be very cool, so I recycled a keyword from Magic, which is something I love to do, so it's my prerogative as a fan making homemade cards. I get to use as few or as many different keywords in my project, and I get to use them a little or a lot, which is something that you normally wouldn't see in an official Magic set, but there you go. So Blitz, the only time in this set that you'll see Blitz is for the Persian people. There will be the concept of loyalty, so captured cities are extra loyal to the Persian, and therefore I decided that Blitz would steal creatures that are killed through the Blitz, and they are now loyal to you. There will be the concept of domestic trade routes, so the Persian love to trade just within their own borders, and so I decided to reward a player who targets himself with stuff, and I use, once again, another old keyword, heroic. Heroic is something that kicks in when you target yourself. So it seemed appropriate to represent domestic trade routes. Now in Civilization 6, these Persian domestic trade routes earn extra gold and extra culture. So you'll see something similar. Gold will translate to treasures and ramp, and I think in this case culture I did not really reference. The gold reward in the game is bigger than the culture reward, so I chose to prioritize the gold reward, the creation of treasures and ramping, and mostly ignore the culture in this case. The Civ 6 Persian people do care very much about their conquered stuff. So yes, as we said, conquered cities are loyal to them, and I decided to treat any instances of conquered stuff as things that you control but don't own, so we'll talk a lot about that. The Persian also have abilities that relate to their roads. They have better roads, more advanced roads than they should. I did not reference that power either, but it's not to say that I didn't find an equivalence to roads in Magic. There is one Civ out there that is all about roads, maybe you can guess, and I certainly did find a way to include the concept of roads and turn it, even though it was quite a roundabout and extravagant acrobatic way, turn it into a concept in Magic. More on that in another video. And finally, should I even need to mention, the Persian do have lots of military boosts, so expect some stat boosts in Magic as well. The color identity of the Persian people, since I do need them to work with most of the existing Blitz cards out there, is red and black. I almost made them red, black, and green, the exact same colors as Toolkit Henzi / Henzo or Hanza, whatever his name is, but no, I chose to make them specifically, well, dare I say, evil, through their surprise wars, city conquering, and creature stealing, and thus red and black. And of course, in a perfect world, the Persian colors should not be red and black, or not even red, black, and green, but they should be red, blue, and green. That way we'd have a Persian rug. Now let's take a look at the Persian power in Civ 6. It's called satrapis, or pies. It grants extra trade routes, and trade routes, as long as they're domestic, as we've said, grant extra gold and culture. And then there's that road thing that I didn't reference. So it turns into a land that looks like this, a mythic rare Persia legendary land. It enters tapped, and there's the pies. Creatures you control have heroic. Whenever you cast a spell that targets this creature, create a treasure. So there you go, I represented the act of domestically trading with yourself with targeting yourself, so casting spells, so either instant sorceries or, let's not forget, auras that target your own creatures. You get a treasure, so you are rewarded with gold when you do a trade route with yourself. And as I said, I ignored that one little point of culture. It taps for a black, and it taps for a red, but then it deals 1 damage to you. I thought I should have one teensy little extra penalty in addition to being a tap land because of that pretty neat power. I think it's fairly easy to build a deck around that, make lots of treasures, lots of ramp, so it could be the foundation of a neat deck. Which commander would be the best commander for such a deck? I don't know. That I don't know. Ironically, it probably wouldn't be either of the Persian leaders, but it's still a pretty nice standalone land, even though it doesn't really synergize a lot with the rest of the bundle. At this point, we would typically look at the other land I made for this bundle, but let's move right on to Cyrus the Great instead. The second land I made relates specifically to the other leader, to Nader Shah, so let's wait until we're there before we look at that other land. So Cyrus has the ability Fall of Babylon, and this is what inspired me to use Blitz. Extra movement for the first 10 turns after declaring a surprise war on a major civilization, extra loyalty per turn in occupied cities, and then a little diplomatic ability that means that essentially your surprise wars are not quite as bad coming from you as they do from other people. So that I didn't turn that into an ability. If somehow you can convince your actual human friends playing against you that your attacks are not that bad, then good, that's on you. You've managed to to play like a true Persian, but magic itself will not help you achieve that. That's you being a good political player. So these other abilities is what I use to invoke Blitz. So here's Cyrus the Great. For 2 red, 1 black, and 2 generic, we've got this rare human noble warrior, 5/4. And the Fall of Babylon says, on each of your turns, you may cast a creature spell as though it had Blitz. The Blitz cost is equal to its mana cost. So there's the surprise war. And now to represent the fact that your conquered cities have extra loyalty, there's whenever a creature you control deals combat damage, if its Blitz cost was paid this turn, gain control of all creatures blocking that creature at the end of combat for as long as you control Cyrus. So there you go, your Blitz creature doesn't have to survive, and hint hint, it'll die at the end of turn anyway, it must get sacrificed. That's how Blitz works. In fact, since it's so underused and often forgotten, maybe a quick reminder of how Blitz does work. You may cast a creature with Blitz for its Blitz cost, and when you do, it gains haste, and also when this creature dies, draw a card. And at end of turn, it gets sacrificed. So that's Blitz, and Cyrus gets to do it. Not only that, but to reflect the loyalty of his new conquests, when his Blitz creatures get blocked by blockers, those blockers flip to you at end of combat. I said at end of combat because if those blockers died, then they're not there anymore to flip to you, so you don't gain them. So they have to survive the combat, but your creature does not, so it doesn't matter what happened to your attacker. The ability says nothing about that, and once again, those attackers will get sacrificed in a few moments anyway, because Blitz says that. So yes, your Blitz creature will die very soon. It might even have died potentially in combat, that doesn't matter, but as long as the blocker survived, you get to steal it. So basically, your opponents have to think twice about blocking. They have to try to actually work extra hard for their blockers to die. So chump blocking is kind of what they want. If they block with anything else, they lose those creatures. So, and of course, whatever you can do that forces your opponents to block might actually work to your advantage. And since your opponents might not want to block you, they would be afraid of blocking, then try to work in creatures that have effects that say whenever this creature deals combat damage to your opponent, because then your opponent is damned if they do, damned if they don't. If they do block your creature, they lose their blocker. You get to steal them. If they don't block your attacker, then that attacker's special ability kicks in when it damages them. So yeah, those are good choices to put in a deck like that, in a Cyrus deck. And that's how I turned sneaky, backstabbing, surprise attacking Cyrus into a magic card. And now let's look at his buddy, Nader Shah. Actually, not really his buddy, and that is the point, is that Nader Shah comes from a completely different period in time of the Persian people. He dates from modern times when Persia was now called Iran, of course. So Nader Shah in Civ 6 has the ability Sword of Persia. Okay, yes. His ability is called Sword of Persia and not of Iran. Yeah, way to make a fool out of me, Civ 6. But yeah, still, the name Iran dates from his time. After all, we say Shah of Iran, and there you go. And Nader Shah is the Shah of Shahs, as it says in his description, and as I've put as the name of his card. So the Sword of Persia, Iran, says extra combat strength when attacking full health units. So that's interesting. A full health unit versus a damaged unit versus a half-dead unit is a very common occurrence in Civilization 6. Not so much in Magic. There is the concept of a creature having taken damage or not having taken damage on a given turn, but since units heal automatically after every turn, then it's not as common a concept. I still worked it in, and I did it in the way that you would expect. A creature that hasn't taken damage this turn is full health and will trigger Nader Shah's ability. And there's more. Cities not founded by Nader Shah receive extra faith and extra gold on domestic trade routes. So more domestic trade routes. So domestic trade routes get even better with Nader Shah when they are between conquered cities. So cities not founded by Persia. So even more incentive to capture enemy units. So you can tell that both leaders will work really well with each other. They might hail from a different time in history completely, but Cyrus steals creatures and Nader Shah gives them abilities. Here's what the card looks like. He has the same mana value, but slightly different mana fixing. 1 red, 1 black, and 3 generic. Nader Shah, the Shah of Shahs. Rare, human, noble, 2/5, so a lot stronger on defense than attack. Sword of Persia, Iran, says whenever a creature you control blocks or becomes blocked by a creature that has not been dealt damage this turn, it gets +3/+1 until end of turn. So there you go. Again, it's not likely that your creatures will ever fight a creature that has taken damage, so you will almost always be able to count on that power. So it's like a super Bushido in a way. The only way that you wouldn't have that is if you play badly and you cast spells that damage those creatures before you launch into a combat. You wouldn't do that. It's your own deck. You wouldn't do things that will remove your ability on purpose. So other players would do that conceivably. They would waste some of their direct damage spells or their pinging abilities to damage your opponent's creatures before they enter into combat with yours. So it's far-fetched, it's unlikely, but hey, the ability is there, so essentially you can almost treat that as a permanent +3/+1 to all your creatures when they fight other creatures. And the really fun ability, the one that works super well with Cyrus, is the other one. Whenever a creature you control but don't own attacks, it gains lifelink until end of turn, then create a treasure. So in this case, a stolen creature represents a conquered city, so when that creature attacks, it's the equivalent of having secured a trade route, a domestic trade route with that city, and Civ 6 tells us then that you're supposed to get a faith bonus and a gold bonus. And sure enough, lifelink will give you life, and faith translates to a bunch of things according to my equivalency chart, and one of those things is indeed life gain, so lifelink fits the bill, and of course gold equals treasures, so you've got everything that you are supposed to get. So that's Nader Shah, the Shah of Shahs. And his special land, I saved it until just now. Yes, it says Iran, and it is modeled after Nader Shah's agenda, so what he likes and doesn't like when you play against him in the game. And basically, he likes people who have a large army, doesn't like people that have a small army. So this land taps for red, and it has something that does exactly that. It penalizes those that have few creatures, and the scale of the penalty depends entirely on the size of the army of the ones with the most creatures. So for 5 mana and tap this land, so essentially you lose 6 mana. So 2 red and 3 generic, it's expensive, but you can do that every turn, so it can get pretty nasty if you've got control of the situation. Players who control the least number of creatures each lose X life, where X is the number of creatures controlled by the players who control the most. So yeah, the X is set by whoever has the most creatures, and those with the least are the ones who take that damage, that loss of life. And you'll notice, of course, that I use plural in both cases, because players who control the least number of creatures, there could be a tie. And players who control the most, again, there could be a tie. And interestingly, crazily, if everyone is tied, then everyone gets that damage. That's pretty cool. That would be a fun, crazy situation, because of course in that case you want one person to just lose a creature, and that one single player will be the only one taking the damage, or the other way around, one person creates one extra creature and suddenly they don't take damage and everyone else does. So that's interesting. And that takes us to the special build of Persia. The unique unit of Persia is the famous Immortal. I'm referring to what we see in the movie 300. Those Immortals, they have that awesome mask. Oops, look at that. Looks like the actual people didn't have that mask. It's just a Hollywood thing. No, Hollywood lied to me? No. So that is a very unique Civ 6 unit. It's a melee unit that also has a range attack, so that's crazy and interesting. And therefore I made it a human warrior archer, so it's both warrior and archer to reflect that Civ 6 reality. And because it's got a bow, it's an archer, of course I gave it reach. And just because of the name, I had to give it Undying. There you go, this is me having fun. There's nothing about the unit that makes it heal better, or makes it impervious to damage, or get extra defense, but because it's called the Immortal, I gave it Undying. So yes, it dies, it comes back with a +1/+1 counter. And the whole thing is a common card that costs 4, 1 red, 3 generic, 4 red, 2, 3. Simple, easy peasy. The Payri Daiza is the unique infrastructure of the Persian. It is an improvement that you can build upon the land, and as is usually the case, I turned those into land auras, and it grants you a bunch of gold and culture. But unfortunately, just like earlier, I chose to ignore the cultural boost and focus instead on the gold. So it is a black aura, 1 black, 2 generic, common, that says, when Payri Daiza enters, create 2 treasure tokens, so there is your gold boost. And then I didn't have to do this, but I gave it something else that synergizes really well with the Blitz ability with Cyrus. It says, whenever you draw a card during your end step, untap Enchanted Land. So there's some interesting shenanigans that you can do with this, because of course when you are blitzing a lot, you will sacrifice creatures during your end step, and then those sacrificed creatures draw you a card. That's part of the Blitz ability. It's the definition of Blitz. Your Blitz creatures draw you a card when they die. So during your end step, you'll draw potentially a bunch of cards. At least one if you Blitz once per turn. So you will get to untap the Enchanted Land where the Payri Daiza is, and if you get to draw many cards during your end step, you will get a whole bunch of these triggers, and between each trigger you get to retap that land if you want. So you will get to untap it, tap it, untap it, tap it, untap it, tap it, and you get to therefore accumulate a bunch of mana. The trick is then finding a way to use that mana. You are in your end steps, too late to cast creatures or do slow sorcery style effects, so you better find a way, a fast and an instant speed way to use that mana. It's about to dissipate because your turn is almost over. So find a way to sink that mana into a cool ability, and unfortunately you can't count on either of those two Persian commanders to help you because they don't have any abilities that cost mana. So yeah, find some other mana sink and turn that untapping and reusing and untapping and mana boosting ability into something useful if you have it. So good for you if you've got something. And at the end of the day, you don't need that crazy combo. You can just draw a card, untap your land once, and then have it untapped during your opponent's turn. You probably have some instant things to do during your opponent's turn. If anything, it's a deterrent. Ooh, I've got a red counter spell that I may or may not have in my hand. Not really, but you know, still, having a land untapped is never bad. Why would you complain about that? So that thing could do that. And we are done with Persia. Again, that is not the exact first version of that set. I settled on Blitz, and that didn't really change, but many of the other cards did change. I figured that I hadn't respected many of these Civ 6 concepts as well as I could, and what you have now is something I'm fairly happy with. And I'm now eager to hear what you think. Would you use either of these Persian leaders as a commander? Which one would make the best commander? Which one should go in the 99? And would you stick them in the 99 of some other deck? I personally don't think that I would need them in my toolbox deck. I don't know. Cyrus being able to steal creatures with my blitzed attackers, that's something I would think about. So, I don't know. I will talk to you later, and just like Cyrus would ask of you, Loki the Gamer asks you to kneel. The difference is that I also ask you to subscribe. Pretty please.